All right. I think my clock says 11 a.m., which means it's time to start the session. Really pleased to introduce you to Craig Kapp, who's going to be telling us about augmented reality in the classroom. And I had a hard time tracking all the things that Craig does. He's a full-time grad student in the PhD program at NYU in interactive telecommunications programs. He's worked for a number of years at the College of New Jersey in instructional technology, but also has taught well. He's currently teaching a class in authoring and multimedia technology at the College of New Jersey. And I also noted that he's taught classes for the College of New Jersey, not only in New Jersey, but also places like Spain and Egypt, where they offer classes overseas. So he's got really strong interest in technology, augmented reality, which you're going to hear about, and also technologies that can be used for supporting assistive technology for students who need those. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn the stage over to Craig, and we're going to see some really amazing things on augmented reality. It's all yours, Craig.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for having me here. If we could actually go to the first slide. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. So I normally don't look like a cardboard box robot. My name is Craig Kapp, and I wear a number of different hats. Like Alan said, I'm a full-time graduate student at the New York University Interactive Telecommunications Program. I'm also an adjunct faculty member in the School of Education in the Educational Technology Master's Program at the College of New Jersey. And my main area of research these days focuses around finding new and interesting ways to utilize emerging technologies such as computer vision and augmented reality in educational settings. So I'm really delighted to be able to be here today and to share some of my work with you. So if we can go to the next slide. I'd like to start off with a general disclaimer about what I'm going to talk about. The topic of augmented reality is really hot right now, and everybody is discussing it and is trying to find ways to use it. This graph here is the Gartner Tech Hype Cycle graph, which basically categorizes public perceptions of technology over time. And it classifies technologies in a number of ways. It starts off with the technologies introduced into the industry as a trigger. The technology then goes into what they call the peak of inflated expectations, where we think the technology is going to solve all the problems and be the best thing since sliced bread. Eventually, the technology is not able to fulfill those needs, falls into the trough of disillusionment, and eventually, once it's found its niche, goes through the slope of enlightenment and then the plateau of productivity. The technology augmented reality right now is right on the peak of inflated expectations portion of the curve. So take everything I'm going to say here with a grain of salt. Interestingly enough, if you were to look at this graph from 2006, the Second Life virtual world environment would be about in the same spot. Unfortunately, now that is down in the trough of disillusionment, but I'm sure based on the efforts of this group that we're going to pull it out, and it's going to be up in the slope of enlightenment very shortly. So if we can go to the next slide. This just supports the trending information here. This is a graph from Google Trends that shows that the search term augmented reality started to spike up in 2009. So really, there's a lot of buzz around this. There's a lot of people talking about it. And I wanted to take this opportunity to demystify what augmented reality is, show you some examples, and show you some actual practical applications of the technology in an educational setting. So if we go to the next slide. So in 1994, Paul Milgram, who's a professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Toronto, devised this construct called the virtuality continuum, which is basically used to classify all manner of human-computer interactions. And it spans from one side to a completely real environment to the other side, which is a completely virtual environment. And then there's this weird, interesting space in the center that we call mixed reality, where we have elements of virtual worlds, elements of real worlds, kind of mixed and commingling. And that's really the interesting area of that I want to discuss today. So if we go to the next slide. So we start off with reality, and I just like this cartoon. And again, if you guys aren't zoomed in on the screen, most of the action's going to happen up there. Reality is we're not going to spend time defining what reality is today during this talk, but let it be said for the purposes of this talk that we're going to be defining it as an absence of technology. And if we go to the next slide, On the end of the virtuality continuum, we have what's called virtual reality, which is the complete immersion within a synthetic environment. It involves us remapping our senses to a series of devices so that we can experience a virtual world through our biological senses. It usually ends up with us looking like cyborgs, but it's a very interesting technology nonetheless, as you can see if we go to the next slide. There's a number of research projects going on right now in the terms of using virtual reality for therapeutic purposes. This project out of Japan right now is a sensory simulation that allows people to work through the fear of heights using virtual reality devices by remapping your hearing and your sight, and living within a world that makes you feel as though you're living on top of a building. People can work through specific issues dealing with the fear of heights. And if we go to the next slide, this is probably one of my favorite examples of virtual reality being used for a therapeutic purpose. This was featured on PBS's Frontline documentary of cognitive behavioral therapists using virtual reality techniques to help Iraqi war veterans overcome post-traumatic stress disorder, where they can actually program the virtual world to mimic characteristics that went through that the soldier went through during their time in Iraq, to help them work through specific issues that they're experiencing. So really interesting stuff going on in terms of virtual reality. Not exactly what we're going to talk about today, but interesting to consider nonetheless. Go to the next slide. If we go a little further down the virtuality continuum, we get to an area called Augmented Virtuality, and that's predominantly a virtual space where physical elements can be inserted in real time. Some common examples of this would be the weather map, where we use a green screen to take a virtual world and intersperse a real element into it, and also children's television shows like Blue's Clues. And if we go one more, this is what we're going to focus on today, the concept of augmented reality. So augmented reality is a predominantly real space in which virtual elements can be inserted in real time. Two common examples that most of you are probably familiar with would be the 1st and 10 line in football, where we can place virtual elements on top of the field in order to indicate the presence of a player, and also in entertainment down at Walt Disney World, the Haunted Mansion ride at the end when a ghost can come home with you. That's a classic example of augmented reality, where you actually see yourself in a mirror with something that does not yet exist in your physical space. So if we go to the next slide. So let's show you some examples of modern augmented reality. These 4 examples right here are relatively new. Within the last year or so they came out, and they kind of typify what I'm talking about in terms of this augmented reality experience. The first is an ad campaign that came out from GE. It's called the Plug into the Smart Grid campaign, where you can print out a small piece of paper on their website, hold it up to your computer with a webcam, and suddenly wind farms and solar power sites will come out of the paper, and you can inspect them from any direction by moving the paper around in 3D space. The next one, Topps Baseball Cards, came out with a feature where you can take a traditional baseball card that they've been printing for many, many years, hold it in front of your webcam, and suddenly the player jumps out of the card. And while looking at it on your computer, you can actually see the player, inspect them. But not only can you see and inspect the player, you can also watch as the players play games with one another. So by placing them down on your desk, you can watch as a pitcher will throw a ball and the batter will hit the ball, and you can play all sorts of fun games by changing the proximity of the cards to one another. The third one down at the bottom is Esquire's December 2009 edition. They dubbed it the Augmented Reality edition, where many pages within the magazine had special symbols that would allow you to experience additional content that would fly out of the book. And then the very last one is a new line of greeting cards that Hallmark has come up with that are augmented reality based, so that you can not only send a card and write your physical wishes inside of the card, but the card contains some sort of animation and extra content on top of the card. Now normally at this point I would stop and say, this is really weird stuff, let me show you how it works, but unfortunately we don't have that ability here, so we're going to show you a quick video that goes through what augmented reality actually is. I shot this video just the other day. The first portion does not have sound, so don't worry if you don't hear anything. And I'm just going to demo me sitting in front of my laptop, standard laptop, nothing special, to show you exactly what augmented reality is. So if we could play that on. So for those of you who are seeing, that is the GE Plug into the Smart Grid ad campaign.
Hey, what you got there? It looks like a ticking heart. It is sticky. Is that bad? I don't know. It depends what ever seen. Except you. Yeah. X's and O's, kittens and puppies.
And unicorns.
And hearts.
I thought I felt something pokey down there.
Unicorns will do that.
My unicorn.
All right. Yeah, they're pretty amazing. I would buy Hallmark cards just for that now. In fact, I have. So if we go to the next slide. So why augmented reality and why now? As somebody mentioned before the session, augmented reality isn't a new concept. It was actually coined in 1992 by a gentleman by the name of Tom Codell at Boeing, where he envisioned a world where airplane engineers would actually be able to augment the work that they were doing by seeing where specific portions of maintenance pieces of equipment would plug into an aircraft that they were working on. But only recently has augmented reality been doable on consumer-grade devices, and really it's been driven by 4 factors. The first is we all have incredibly fast, inexpensive computers on our desktop. The second is our mobile devices are becoming more powerful, and we all have them, and they all are coming pre-installed with cameras and run at a very fast speed. The third is that laptops these days more or less come pre-installed with webcams, and that's a prerequisite for making augmented reality happen. And then the last, and probably the most important, is that there was a flash-based implementation of the augmented reality detection algorithms that came out about 1.5 years ago. And that basically said that you don't need any special software to do this stuff anymore. It can all run in a web browser. Anything that can run Flash can do augmented reality. And that's really opened up the doors to a huge community of Flash developers who want to try to get this technology out there. So if we go to the next slide. So how does it actually work? Well, normally what happens is the camera will look out into the environment and look for a specific symbol. We call these symbols a lot of things. The ones that I work with are these strange little black and white symbols that you can see that I'm standing on down here. Call them fiducial markers. And basically what the computer tries to do is it looks for that specific symbol and tries to determine that symbol's orientation in 3D space. And once it finds it, it knows how to place the 3D object on top of it. If we go to the next slide. So there are 2 basic ways that we implement augmented reality these days. The first we call the magic mirror method. And the magic mirror method says that we have a camera that's facing the user, and the user can then see themselves projected in front of themselves as though they were looking into a mirror. The image at the top is an image of researchers at Columbia University who are wearing a whole gaggle of these fiducial markers, wanting themselves to look like hockey players and warriors and all sorts of fantasy creatures. And down the bottom is more of a Minority Report-esque implementation of the magic mirror idea, where basically we have a camera looking out into the world and we see a representation of ourselves in some sort of mirror with that augmentation. If we go to the next slide. The second modality is the magic lens, and that's where we have some sort of device that acts as an intermediary between us and the virtual content. So you can see me wearing the high-fashion augmented reality goggles there at the top up at NYU. I'm actually looking at a table there at a special symbol, and you can see on the monitor behind me what I'm actually seeing inside of those goggles. So there's some sort of pass-through filter that goes between me, my eyes, and the world that allows me to experience the augmented content. Mobile devices are really leading the charge in terms of the magic lens delivery method. Because our mobile devices are so fast and have cameras pre-built into them, they're the perfect delivery platform for augmented reality on the go. Let's go to the next slide. So the question is, how can we use these sorts of magical technologies that allow us to put virtual creatures on top of these physical 2D devices, and how can we use them for educational purposes? And I want to kind of clarify this before I walk into this next area, that these paradigms really haven't been clarified yet. We really haven't figured out best practices of how augmented reality can be used in education. The Horizon report puts it at the 2 to 3 year mark out down the road, so it's really an emerging technology. But I'd like to explore some things with you guys and show you some of my work as well as some commercial work in terms of using augmented reality in an educational setting. So if we go to the next slide, the first is kind of an obvious implementation. Why don't we take an existing physical bit of educational material and just throw augmented reality on top of it so that we can add a layer of additional value to this physical device. So the first here is a magic book that came out from a company called Larngear Technologies. They were commissioned by the Thai Ministry of Education in Bangkok. And what they do in this book is they've created an earth science textbook whereby when it's put in front of a webcam on a computer, we could see all sorts of earth science concepts pop out of the book. So at the top, we can inspect the different layers of the Earth's crust, delving deeper into the center of the Earth. At the bottom, we can see an animated demonstration of how sonar works, and it just pops directly out of the book. It's pretty amazing stuff. If you go to the next slide. This was actually the first augmented reality project I ever made. This was the beginning of last year. I tried to create my own augmented reality textbook, so I'm going to show you a quick video of this in a moment. Basically, what I did inside of this was I tried to take two textbooks that I knew that professors were using, and I wanted to try to create a layer of value that went on top of them. So the first, well, actually you could start it, and I'll just talk over it a little bit. There's no sound in this video as well, so you'll have to listen to my narration a bit. Okay, so this is the amateur astronomy textbook that I augmented, and you can see here that I've placed the Earth and the Moon rotating on this page that flies above that symbol, and the student can move the book around in any direction and inspect the model from any direction. I took the textures for the planets. You'll see here now I have the full solar system that appears on the book. I took the textures from the planets directly from the NASA website, so all of the content there is authentic in terms of the look and feel of the planets. The next book that I augmented, hopefully I'm in sync with you guys, is this book on global warming. And this one was kind of fun because what we did with this project is we took some GIS data on how fast the wind blows throughout the country, and we created a false topography map that allowed us to inspect the world as though we're inspecting it for where we should be placing wind farms. So it's kind of an interesting way to kind of get some additional value into an existing educational media. So yes, to answer your question, and I'm going to answer all these questions at the end, but yes, all of these examples that I'm showing you guys here are done via the magic mirror method of augmented reality delivery. So one would have to put the augmented reality device in front of a camera and then see it on a screen projected back to you in a mirror-like fashion. Or you could use glasses. Either one works. So then the next step is, all right, so it's all well and good to have these static models or models that move slightly, but what can we do about actually creating experiences where we can manipulate the augmented reality world and change its behavior at runtime? So this, oh, and to answer your question once more, and I'll answer a lot of questions at the end. In terms of special software, no, all of these things are Flash-based. All you need is a webcam to run it. In fact, most of the examples, including the rotating planets and the Earth Science textbook, are available on my blog. So if you just visit my blog, it'll tell you what you need to print it out, hold it in front of your webcam, and magically it should all work. So in terms of simulation, this project from Larngear, the same company that did the first augmented reality textbook, they created a playset for chemistry students that allows them to inspect how atoms and molecules form. So the top photo here are three atoms, and when you hold them together, they'll actually jump off the cards and combine into a single water molecule. In addition, it's very difficult in a chemistry classroom to talk about electron spin and to talk about how electrons form around a molecule. So at the bottom, you can actually hold up cards next to the molecules and see how their electron shells will form. And then on the right, my favorite card is this information inspector card, which allows you to touch a molecule and actually learn more about it. So it really allows you to create these living play sets. And if you go to the next slide, this is my own exploration to scientific simulation. This is a project I worked on last year called Sim Snails. And if you notice on the left, I created a frame, this wooden frame, that has an augmented reality symbol printed in the center of it. The frame is built on top of a Lazy Susan, so it can spin around on a table. You mount a camera that points down at the frame, and as soon as it notices the symbol, this small virtual ecosystem will appear. And you can see that ecosystem on the right-hand side. The ecosystem is populated by these small snails. The snails live around, and they have this wonderful little life until we introduce predators into the mix, which swoop down and eat the snails. And it's a simulation that allows children to be able to modify parameters of the ecosystem so that they can learn more about how natural selection and evolution works within a population. So if you go to the next slide, I'll just show you a real quick video. The full video is on my website if you want to check it out. I just kind of edited it down slightly so you can kind of get the gist of what SimSnails does. So if we could play that, that'd be great. In the second garden, we introduce predators into the simulation. These predators will swoop down and periodically eat the most visible snails in the environment. These snails are removed from the world and do not have a chance to breed and pass on their genes to the next generation. The remaining snails do have an opportunity to breed with one another, and a new generation of snails will be born. You can see based on the graphs at the bottom of the screen that, over time, the birds are selecting the snails that are the most different than the environmental baseline color, and as such, the snails that blend in the most have more opportunities to breed. The birds are, unknowingly, creating a selective pressure on the snail population and causing the population to shift towards a given look. This is called directional selection. We can use another environmental card to change the color of the environment in this garden to reset the simulation. You can see that the same pattern will emerge in each environment. The birds will select out the most visible snails, leaving behind the best camouflage snails to breed and populate the next generation. All right, great. And if we can go to the next one. And this is an absolutely incredible project that's come out of the Human Interface Technology Lab in New Zealand. This is an augmented physics application. This actually doesn't use any markers. What we'll do in this application is you can use a pen and paper to sketch out a mechanical model, and the computer will actually determine what you're trying to build in 3D, will render it virtually, and allow you to experiment with different physical properties on top of those objects. So if we play this video, there's no sound in this video as well. But this is a relatively short one. So you can see in this one that it starts off, and you can erase or change any property simply by using a pencil, and the simulation will be affected immediately. So it's pretty incredible that we can have this sort of performance out of a standard laptop using a built-in webcam. To be able to simulate all sorts of fantastic physical properties. So this one supports, obviously there's a gravity force, spring motion, and you could see at the very end, before they roll the credits, that all it was a simple webcam sitting on a small tripod pointing down at a piece of paper on a table. So it's pretty cool stuff. So you go to the next one. One of my biggest passions is finding ways that we can use technology for assistive technology purposes for people with disabilities. So the device that you see here is a physical device. It's called the Dynavision, and it's used in sports performance training to increase agility amongst athletes. But it's also used for stroke patients who are suffering a condition called visual neglect, where a portion of their visual field has been eliminated, and they need to retrain their body by learning coping techniques in order to regain full control of their visual field. The way that this object works is that tiny little lights will appear on the board, and the object is to push the lights as fast as possible. It's an incredibly expensive device, and a lot of occupational therapy suites don't have access to it. So what I did, if you go to the next slide, is I created an augmented reality version of this, where the patient can see themselves in their webcam, and they can grab stars that appear in their visual field. We do a little bit of motion tracking, and we allow the patient to be able to actually grab and touch the stars, and we keep track of how fast it took them to do that on both sides of their body. And then we can calculate statistics for the therapist afterwards so they can use in planning additional treatments for the patient. If you go to the next slide, I'm currently working on a project right now with a group to develop an augmented reality playset for a group of children at the Rusk Rehabilitation Hospital up in New York City. What we're doing here is we're creating an augmented reality space where kids can construct their own worlds. They can actually use cards to grow trees, to grow flowers, change the weather, create their own avatars, and basically work as though these characters were we're action figures, but they're augmented action figures. And the beauty of that is that we can go to the website at any time, or we can change the application at any time to include any sorts of new assets. So if the kids were really interested in lions, or they went to school and they were learning about a specific animal, we can include that into their augmented reality simulation. So these are just some photos of that project that we're working on right now. And if you go to the next slide. So, like I said before, mobile technology is really at the vanguard of implementing augmented reality and giving it access to it to everyone. Mobile devices run usually the iPhone that I have in my pocket now runs 600 megahertz, which is, I bet we can all remember a time when we had a computer that ran at 600 megahertz on our desktop. So the fact that we have that much processing power in our desktop and in our pockets is pretty incredible. This application right here is one that runs in the iPhone that I use fairly often. It's a subway finder in New York. What it does is it uses your GPS as well as your compass, and all you do is just hold your camera around and point in the direction, and it'll show you in real time what subway stops are in that direction and how far you need to walk in order to get into that subway. So it's pretty cool. And if you go to the next slide, this is the Wikitude world browser, and the Wikitude world browser is a tool that uses geolocated information from Wikipedia to provide contextual access to information in your local space. So if something has been tagged locally in Wikipedia, you can use the Wikitude world browser while walking around an unfamiliar place to learn more about its history. So again, pretty interesting stuff. We go to the next slide. Someone mentioned AR sites earlier, and I did want to talk a little bit about AR sites. AR sites is this fantastic project that works with the Google 3D SketchUp warehouse, where any model that's been generated for Google Earth or for Google SketchUp that's included in the public warehouse can be visualized in augmented reality. So you just print out a symbol, you select what model you want, and suddenly you can now have that symbol on your desktop, and you can inspect it from any direction. While we didn't use AR sites in this project, and I'm actually sorry I didn't put a video of this in here, we actually used a similar project to this in a 6th grade English classroom where we had kids design their own costumes for a play of Hamlet, and then we had them wear AR tags on their bodies in front of a camera, and their virtual costumes that they created in their computer class suddenly became their costumes for the play. So that was pretty cool, and it's the same idea as AR sites. If you go to the next slide. This project here is called the Whisper Deck. This is a project that's available on my website as well. It's a augmented reality search engine that's completely voice controlled. This is the only project that I've ever done that actually really uses the goggles to their fullest extent. What you do is you don the goggles, you stand away from a desktop, you look down, and you basically just start speaking, and the world will reconfigure itself. It'll go out to the internet and gather information about the topic that you're talking about and reconfigure the 3D world in front of you to represent and to look at to show you the information that you've requested. So if you go to the next slide, there's a quick video that shows you what the Whisper Deck is all about.
Upon noticing a predefined symbol, a 3D world instantly appears. As long as the symbol remains in view, this newly created augmented space will continue to persist and will allow the user to examine it from any direction by simply moving around it in 3D space. Users can issue commands to the Whisper Deck using a series of voice commands. These commands will cause the world to reconfigure itself based upon your individual preferences. For example, if you'd like to have the world gather information about a topic you're interested in, say Boston Terriers, simply say the command search Boston Terrier with the keyword over at the end of the sentence. The system will go out to the internet and retrieve information regarding your request, including a series of spoken definitions from Wikipedia, as well as a set of images from various search engines such as Google Images, Flickr, and Picasa. Here's a demo of this in action. Search Boston Terrier, over.
Boston Terrier, Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. The Boston Terrier is a breed of dog originating in the United States of America. Boston Terriers are typically small, compactly built, well-proportioned dogs.
In addition, the Whisper Deck also allows visitors to compare the relative popularity of search terms by interfacing with Google Trends. Speaking the command compare will allow you to name any number of search terms which can be visualized as a 3D bar graph. Here's a demo of this process in action. Compare Philadelphia, Boston, over.
Comparing the terms Philadelphia and Boston.
I hope that you found this demo of the Whisper Deck enjoyable and useful. If you're interested in learning more, please feel free to visit my blog at blog.craigcap.com. Thanks for watching.
All right. And if you're interested, there's a full, a longer video on my blog that talks about the rest of the project for the Whisper Deck. It was more of a concept piece, but people seem to really like it, so I'm probably going to continue with that project. My current project, the one that I'm most excited about, is how can we use augmented reality for storytelling purposes? Because building these things requires a significant amount of technical know-how up front. And I wanted to try to find a way to make this sort of technology available to a lot of people who don't have that technical know-how. So I took this idea of creating a magical augmented reality 3D pop-up book. And I said, what if we could make a builder that would be simple enough for children to be able to arrange assets within a 3D world and then create these rich stories that they could then share with people on the web or also through augmented reality. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that I've constructed, and this will actually be available for beta use probably in about 2 weeks. I've constructed a builder that we're currently testing that allows you to interface with the Open Clip Art project, which has about 26,000 open source vector objects that kids can use to construct their own 3D pop-up books. Within the space, you can use chat bubbles, kind of like a comic book style chat bubble to indicate when a character is speaking, and you can also provide narration on a specific page. And if you go to the next page, you can actually see a demo of the Zuburst project in action. Here's an example Zuburst book that tells the story of 3 friends sitting around a campfire. You can rotate around the scene using your mouse to get a better look, and items within the book are clickable, allowing you to discover and learn more about the characters within the story. A story can include up to 10 pages, and you can easily move from page to page using the interface at the bottom of the screen. In addition, you can choose to experience a Zuburst book in a number of ways, including in augmented reality. If you have a webcam installed on your computer, simply click on the augmented reality button at the top of the screen and watch as the book appears in the palm of your hand. Notice how the book continues to function as though it was being displayed on the screen. You can cycle through pages using the same interface, and items on the page will remain clickable. Alright, so like I said, the Zooburst project will be publicly available probably in about 2 weeks. If you're interested, go to zooburst.com and sign up for a beta account, and I'd be happy to let any NMC members come in and play around with it and tell me what I need to fix before I release it to the rest of the world. And then I wanted to kind of, now that we've talked about a few of the larger projects, talk to you about some experiments that I've been doing in terms of making augmented reality even more accessible. You know, a lot of these projects that I've talked about so far rely on a lot of the same interaction methods, so we wanted to kind of explore how we could use different senses in order to affect an augmented reality world. I don't have videos of these, but there are videos on my site if you want to check them out. The first is touch sensitivity. This was for a project where we wanted to make a video game, and basically to control the augmented reality world, you touch the paper on those shaded regions at the bottom, and you can control characters by having your fingers basically obscure the color that's on the page. I've also worked on creating mixed reality environments. The one on the right is a racing game where you can actually turn on your camera and race a car all across your desktop, and you could place roadblocks up like your hand, your keys, your iPhone, and the car will actually bounce off of those objects, so you can create obstacle courses in physical space for a virtual object. If you go to the next slide, I worked a bit with creating artistic expression engines. The first one is a light sculpture piece, which allows you to use colored lights, colored LEDs, to actually sculpt and craft a 3D object using lights. So you can actually raise up the plane off of the page and bring it out into 3D. And then I've also tried to extend the augmented reality idea into other spaces. So I'm using text messaging in the second object, which allow people to actually text in their preference and have the augmented reality world change. So it's basically an audience response system or polling system that uses text messaging to drive the experience. If you go to the next slide. I was going to show a live demo of this, but I couldn't get it to work in this environment, and it's probably better off because I think it eats up the server lag time. But I created a controller that actually uses augmented reality to control a Second Life avatar. You can see me and my dog on the right, and we're holding an augmented reality cube, and as I move that cube, it controls the cube inside of Second Life. So we created a connection between the two worlds, so augmented reality controlling virtual reality. I envisioned that this sort of tool could be a very simple fix where somebody could affix one of these tags onto somebody with physical disabilities in a way where we can find that they have a specific defined physical motion that they have full control over, and use it as a controller so that we can create custom controllers for people to be able to access larger virtual spaces. And because my dog is in this one, I like to call this one my Augmented Reality project. So just a bad joke. And then the next one, please. The future. So what can we look for in the future of augmented reality? Well, I do think that number one, we're going to see more desktop augmented reality because Flash can do this now, and we don't need any special software. Any computer that can run Flash can run an augmented reality visualization. So expect to see more desktop-based augmented reality projects. We're going to see a surge in mobile augmented reality. Our devices are only getting faster, and I truly believe that the platform of the mobile phone will be the platform that augmented reality truly takes off in. Two projects to watch in the future. MIT has a fantastic project. It's a wearable augmented reality display called the Sixth Sense, which uses a small camera, a cell phone, and a Pico projector to actually display an augmented reality interface in front of you using the Pico projector. You can hold up your fingers like you want to take a picture by making the picture gesture in front of you, and the camera will pick it up, take a photograph, and it has all sorts of wonderful gestural analysis pieces built into it. So look for some more integrated wearable solutions in the future. And then down at the bottom is a Sony project called the iPet, which is out in Europe and should be out here very soon, which is a fully functional augmented reality virtual pet. And it's an incredible project. This pet lives in your living room. You can see him through the television. You can play with him by touching and interacting. And you can even draw toys using physical pieces of paper. Those toys will be rendered in 3D, similar to that physics project that I was showing you guys earlier. And the actual character will begin to play with the toys, so it's pretty amazing stuff. And if you go to the next slide, I think I've actually reached the end. So all materials are on the NMC site, but for actual live demonstrations, feel free to visit my blog. Most of the projects that I've worked on, they don't have full-on demonstrations. They do have full YouTube videos that you can check out on my blog. So thank you very much, and I'd be happy to take any questions from you guys.
Thank you, Craig. I think we're going to go around with a little virtual shovel and pull everybody's jaw off the ground. You really amazed us with everything you showed us, and I'm sure we got lots of questions. I know a lot of people were kind of wanting a sense of what it takes to create some of these technologies, since you've done so many of them.
Okay, yeah. So I got started with this back in January of 2009. Full disclaimer, I've been a Flash guy for many, many years, so it didn't take that long to actually get into the development routine. There's an open source toolkit called the FLAR toolkit, the FLAR toolkit. That's what I use extensively for developing augmented reality environments. It's not actually that difficult if you're a Flash person. The only difficult thing is you have to learn a little bit about paper vision, which is the 3D rendering environment that the toolkit likes to work with. But with that said, I know that there are a lot of non-Flash people out there and a lot of non-programmers who would be interested in creating their own worlds. That's why I decided to go in the direction of Zooburst to kind of create a fun, easy interface that would allow anybody to create their own applications.
Right, and from what I saw, I mean, there's ways that people can leverage some of this without having necessarily to create original things, as you've done by using some of the tools you've created.
Absolutely, yeah. AR Sites is a great example. You can basically point it to any 3D object inside of the Google 3D SketchUp warehouse, and then augment that out into physical space.
Right, and I know there's some banter back and forth, people speculating about, obviously the iPhone and the iPad, maybe or maybe not ever having Flash as a capability. How are you looking at that in the future?
It makes me very, very sad. There will be ways to do it. There is a native AR toolkit port that works on the iPhone currently. It's much more difficult to program augmented reality on the iPhone than it is to program it for the desktop, but I know people are working towards it. It remains to be seen whether Flash CS5 will give us the ability to directly access the camera, and if it does, then we may be able to port these Flash apps directly to the iPhone. But time will tell. Once CS5 comes out, I'm sure the augmented reality community will jump on it and see what we can do with it.
Right, so we're getting lots of positive responses in the chat here, and I imagine the rest of the people are out there Googling and looking at your examples, and I have to applaud you because I went to double check your blog URL this morning, and you'd already posted all the resources for your presentation. We really appreciate that.
No problem, thanks.
And for sharing all your work. I know I want to sign up for some of your betas there. Do you have any other questions from the audience? Ideas brewing as to maybe get to Craig's question is how you can see AR being used in education. How do you teach others how to create? Do you teach others how to create? Do you do any workshops, or maybe seen applications in museums, as Jana Bailey asked?
I think there's an incredible amount of potential in museums right now. I think this technology could really, really take off. Have I taught anybody how to do this? A few other graduate students at NYU are interested in it, and I've done some basic Flash tutorials with them. I think in the future that we'll really start to develop frameworks that will allow anyone to do this without any programming, that hopefully we'll be able to start developing GUI frameworks that we can use to develop these sorts of apps. But yeah, if anyone's in New Jersey and you want to take my Flash class, feel free to sit in. I think this will be a future addition to it for sure.
Oh, you might get all 60 people here. I know Larry Johnson's asking, and I was intrigued too by that project you mentioned with the 6th grade kids and their costumes. Do you have a link for that you could get to us? Because we're looking for AR examples for the new Horizon K-12 report, which is being written as we speak.
Okay, yeah, I'll actually talk to the person I worked on with that. I supervised an independent study in Flash last year and was working with a teacher at a school here in New Jersey, and we piloted this project in her class. So I'll actually contact her and see if we can get some documentation on that for you guys.
Okay, and I think you might be getting some calls soon about doing some live demos for us, because I think we really want to see this in person.
I would love to. I'll bring my giant bag of tricks here. It's a shame that we
couldn't
be
too. Bring your dog too.
Yeah,
I love augmented reality.
Yeah, I haven't quite gotten to the point where I put a tag on her yet, but I'd love to give her wings or something. So look for that one soon.
Right, and Jana Bailey's asking, like, hypothetically, could someone get something with a tag at a museum and then take it home to sort of generate an AR thing related to what they saw at the museum?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, the design of the tag is completely open. Anyone can make a tag. You could define a series of tags that you use in a museum, and then there could be a corresponding web app that you use when you get home. Hold that tag in front of the webcam, and then have another object come out. And you can even have it be customized so that based on the exhibits that you selected, you can go home and actually have a version of that experience that you take with you. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be lots of wheels spinning on that as an idea. Do we have any more questions for Craig here? I have to say this was an astounding session, Craig. Thank you for bringing
Well, thank you very
us.
much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, folks. So you may need to go and pick your jaw back up and get it back into your face so you can take a break now. We'll have a break for about an hour and 15 minutes. And again, at 1 p.m. Pacific, we've got right back here in the same location, we have Brett Bixler from Penn State University talking about their gaming initiative. They've actually set up a gaming lab, and I was there when they were just opening it. It's a pretty interesting and innovative project for making a gaming lab as a student resource. And then at 2 p.m. Pacific is going to be another great session with Tom Caswell and Marion Jensen on tweeting history in the classroom with their, I don't have to ask them how to pronounce the name of the site, but Twihistory, basically doing historical reenactments, really interesting way of doing storytelling through the use of Twitter. So thanks again. We're going to be turning off the audio. You certainly, Craig may entertain some questions if you want to come up here. But other than that, thank you everybody for making this symposium so far great, and we're going to keep on that trend. We'll be back in 75 minutes.